Hi there, this is the Ethelred and Emma show, and there's some Vikings in it too. And this is a question of whether we ought to put our scare quotes back around Anglo-Saxon England, or maybe we should be talking about Anglo-Danish England. So we're going to talk about England in the last years during which English speakers were running it for a really long time. I'm going to revert to the old to the outdated nomenclature, Anglo-Saxon England here because we don't have a great substitute. And what I want to emphasize is that really we are looking at an ethnically determined polity in certain respects at this moment, whether we're naming it fairly or not. These are the latter days of Anglo-Saxon England. So to bring us back up to speed, we remember that there had been a quite a varied history for a while, but ever since the days of Alfred the Great, who died in the year 900, the country of England, I shouldn't say the country, but the area had been divided up more or less like this, with an English kingdom on the south, and some of these are petty kingdoms sometimes, and other times it's unified. But England going on in the south, and the most important center of power being Winchester for political power and cultural pull, and then Canterbury for ecclesiastical power, balanced by this thing going on up north. Northumbria hangs on up there. Sometimes Vikings rule it, sometimes English people rule it. And then so-called Danish Mercia, or the Danelaw, is a complex area that is, for the vast majority of this time, ruled in one way or another by Scandinavian kings. Sometimes petty kingdoms, sometimes kings who managed to unify large parts of the territory. Off and on English kingdoms. So the borders of the Danelaw are always contested, and there's a certain amount of cultural strife going on. In fact, there's a lot of cultural strife going on certainly from 900 when Alfred sets the border here with the Danelaw, all the way up until our period. And our period is going to start in the 990s or so, the 980s. Do think about the Danelaw though as a thing that's not just a political conquest. There's a real movement of peoples here, and this is a map from what used to be an online exhibit by the British Museum, and sadly it's been taken down. But this picture, every dot on this picture shows a location, a town, a village, a feature of the landscape that has a Scandinavian name still in our modern times. And you can tell right there that there's more going on to this Danish conquest and settlement than just a couple of kings coming in and taking over. You've also learned this from your research probably into, Scandinavian borrowings, or you will learn it from your research into Scandinavian borrowings. This is a place where peoples are really mixing. There are tons of ethnically English people running around up there, and there are tons of Scandinavian people going up there. Their languages are pretty similar, so they can often understand each other, and it's not too hard to learn the other language, but they're distinctive, and they're distinctive to this day. So in the south of England, we still have church. In the north of England, it's still, in regional dialects, it's still a kirk, because the old Germanic term didn't kept the k sound in Scandinavian languages that turned to a ch in English, in Old English already. So we're looking at a real people living in close contact for generations. As you know now, one of the borrowings from Old Norse into Old English was husband. Another one is leg. Another one is window. Another one is sky. Another one is die. Another one is cake. The kinds of vocabulary that are being swapped around here tell us that the English speakers are relating to the Scandinavian speakers constantly in everyday life. And that's a source of no considerable strife because there's a lot of political difference going on here. The English people still resent those folks as invaders. Those people are tired of being treated as outsiders after a few generations, and there's a lot of religious difference going on too, as well as political cultural difference, but it breaks down along religious lines. The English are Christian, most of the Scandinavians are pagan. Not all, most. So the kings in England at this point are King Ethelred and Queen Emma of Normandy. We have Ethelred there on the right. He's called Ethelred the Unready, and that doesn't mean unprepared, it means ill-advised. And he did some things that are ill-advised. It's also a pun on his name, because Aethelred means noble counsel. So it's sort of like saying, wise guy the dumb, when they call him Ethelred the Unready. Emma is from Normandy. That's that area on the north of France. There's a fun quirk here. Normandy is called Normandy because that's where the Capetian dynasty, the first really French kings, told the Vikings that they could have the coastline if they just please protect it for them. So the Northmen settled in Northumbria or Normandy. So Emma's, in a certain respect, got some old Viking stock. But she's from France. She speaks French. She also speaks English. She has the English name Alfkifu, which is sort of nice. Ethelred marries Emma, and we've got her looking at a book, talking to her sons there on the other side. There's a monk giving her the book. One of the things that Ethelred did that was ill-advised was conduct mass executions and some ethnic cleansing against those Scandinavian settlers. This is somewhere in the western, or more western part of England. We've got a mass grave, quite possibly from the reign of Alfred himself. And if you'll take a look at the distribution of the bones, you'll see that this was not an accident of disease or something. And enough analysis has been conducted on these skeletons to prove that they are Scandinavians and that they're men of a certain fighting age. So it certainly looks like they were rounded up, captured for some reason, and then executed. There's been a lot of speculation about exactly when this mass grave and one sort of like it in Oxford were made. And one possibility, that we've got no proof, one possibility is the St. Brice's Day massacre. In 1002, good old Aethelred, being rather ill-advised, urged the mass slaughter of Scandinavian settlers. And things like this certainly resulted from it. That does not contribute to the stability of the region. And within a few years, the kings of Norway, including Sweyn Forkbeard, are looking for ways to expand into England, and there are several kinds of drive behind them. Pardon me. For one thing, good old Sweyn here, he was son of Harold Bluetooth. Harold Bluetooth had been king of Norway before him, and it was only in the middle of the 900s, in 954, when good old Eric Bloodaxe finally got kicked out of Northumbria, and Scandinavian rule had nearly come to an end over there. Scandinavian power was weak, but Sweyn saw an opportunity, since those Danish kingdoms had been left open for the taking from his point of view, that he could expand his realm into there, and that's what he did. We never see his beard in the medieval images. It bothers me, but this is definitely him. You can see Swanus Rex there next to his head, and you see him portrayed as a king because that's what he is. Well, Sweyn Forkbeard invaded England in 1014 and conquered it in 1016, killed Aethelred, and Emma here, with her two baby sons, fled back to Normandy. She went back to, we can't say France because it hasn't been invented yet, but she went back to what's now the coast of France, into the care of the Duke of Normandy, who was part of her family. So also in the year 1014, our guy Wulfstan, Archbishop of York, wrote this sermon, which you've read, or which you may now read, Sermo Lupiat Anglos, the Sermon of the Wolf, that's his nickname, Sermon of the Wolf to the English when they are most severely persecuted by the Danes. And in fact, You'll see this is a cotton manuscript. You know what that means, Nero A1. And this copy of it certainly belonged to Wulfstan. We know enough. He's one of the rare people whose handwriting we know from the Middle Ages. And not the main text, but the annotations on the main text here, in between the lines, are his, which is pretty amazing. Now, you remember what this tells us about the Danes. He's really upset that the English people are being conquered by, pardon me, by these pagan Danes, by what we call Vikings. And by the way, when Sweyn did this, he didn't just take Northumbria or the Danelaw again. He managed to conquer the entirety of England, even though he only ruled for 40 days before he died. The person who came after him was his son Canute. Canute, in 1016, became king of England, and here we've got a contemporary manuscript image of him. This is made during his life, and it may in fact be a real likeness. There is a little more styling in that face than you see in a lot of medieval drawings, and we don't have a reason to guess they didn't know what he looked like. It's entirely possible he looked like this. Well, Canute went about things rather differently. You'll see we've got a picture of him being crowned here, and one of the things he did was marry the princess. So he married Aethelred's widow, Emma, and here you see them donating a cross to Newminster, to a monastery, together as husband and wife. And you can also see that we have angels touching their crowns, their royal insignia, and those angels are pointing upward towards Jesus there, who's been cut off, but that is Christ enthroned in glory above them. And you can see that the angels are directing their souls to heaven because of their piety in this gift. So what we have is Canute doing something pretty smart here. Now, his personal piety is no reasonable subject for us to debate. Perhaps he was sincerely moved in his spirituality. We have no idea. But from a political point of view, he married the old queen. I shouldn't say old, although he was 10 years younger than her, but he married the widow of the king, so he got himself attached to the royal line, and he converted to the mainstream religion, and he began to do things in English. He didn't have a particular goal of making England into a new Norway. He really appeared to be sort of happy moving into England and running England as England, which he did, and his reign is generally considered to have been one of the good ones from 1016 to 1035. And in fact, remember old Wulfstan here. Wulfstan switches jobs. This is another page from the same manuscript. You'll see these are Canute's laws. They're written in Old English, and they're written by Wulfstan. There towards the bottom of the page, we can see at least one of his notes. That other one may be something else. But elsewhere they're annotated in his hands, and it reads right there in Old English, those Y's are actually S's. So, this is so Geradnis be Knut König, alles Englandes König, und denna König, mit his witena Jethrachte Gerade. So this is the council, or the law, which Canute King, or rather King Canute, king of all the English lands, or all the lands of the English, and king of the Danes, just in case anyone forgets, with his witena, with his wise counsel, through consideration, has set down as wisdom. So Wulfstan has changed his tune. Now that Canute has gotten on board with the cultural project of the English, Wulfstan's bringing the powers of that cultural project into the royal work of Wulfstan. And by the way, into the royal work of Canute. And by the way, here Wulfstan's writing in wonderful West Saxon, even though Wulfstan has been Archbishop of York for almost forever at this point, for over a dozen years. He doesn't write in Northumbrian. He doesn't write in his native dialect of Worcester. He, presumably, we think that's where he's from. He writes in the Winchester dialect because that has become the literary standard. And you remember this because of what Alfred did by popularizing the copying of books into that, and the translating of books into the dialect of what's spoken at the king's court in Winchester. And he also, through ecclesiastical reform, spread that around. So remember this about the rule of Canute. He came in and he didn't try to make England Danish. He basically became a lot more English in order to rule it and rule it well. He kept the polity of England really more or less intact, and apparently put a stop to some of that ethnic cleansing Aethelred had been up to. But there's more. Back to Emma. If we look over there at her sons, it's a little difficult to tell if you don't know this, but her sons at this point are Edward the Confessor. That was her son from her first husband, Aethelred, and Hardicanute, which is her son from Canute. This will prepare you for the next chapter.